everyone, this is Helloangel.design. Today we are making this beautiful dress step-by-step tutorial. I use a tie-dye fabric to make this dress. It is very interesting tie-dye fabric. This dress that we are making today, the back dress is a snap closure, or you can also make it a button closure, and we have a cap sleeve for the dress. I have shown many times how to make your basic pattern paper on my YouTube. If you don't know how, I would recommend that you should go through my YouTube. I will also put the link on the description box below so that you can know how to make a basic pattern paper for your top dress. And I've also mentioned on my video how to cut out your skirt. For the diaper cover, if you are interested of making a diaper cover for your dress, I would recommend that you should go to my website www.helloangel.design. You will find the diaper cover on my website. You can download it for $3.99. It is not that expensive. So this is how it is. It is easy, simple, step-by-step tutorial. Let's jump right to this tutorial. First thing that you are going to do, you are going to cut out your fabric. I have already cut out my fabric. I believe a lot of you know how to cut out your fabric. So I have cut out my top dress. This is the back of my top dress, and I've also cut out the lining. You can see that my lining, the fabric, I have to join it together because I don't have a long fabric. And I've also cut out the front top dress, and you can also see that I have joined it together because I don't have a long fabric. I have cut out my cap sleeve. I'm going to line in the cap sleeve with the same fabric, and this is my skirt, which I've also cut out. And I've also cut out my placket for the center back. I'm going to tell you the measurement that you're going to take when you are cutting yours out. So I will place my measuring tape on the placket. So this I'm using centimeters. You're going to cut 3 centimeters or 1.25 inch. But when you are cutting out your fabric, make sure you fold it into 2 and you measure 3 centimeters or 1.25 inch. Make sure to cut a long piece of fabric so that you can be able to join it at the center back of your dress making. And this is my skirt. I'm going to tell you the width of my skirt and the length of my skirt. So I will place my measuring tape like this because the fabric is folded on this side. I'll place my measuring tape. The measurement that I have here is 65 centimeters. If you're using inches, you can measure 25.5 inch. And I'll place my measuring tape. So this is the length of my fabric, and the length of my fabric is 34 centimeters. If you're using inches, you can measure 13.5 inches. So this is how I cut out my fabric. Let's join the dress together. First thing that you are going to do, you open your front top dress. This is the front of my top dress. You take the back pieces. You're going to put the both shoulder seam together. Make sure that both front fabric are facing each other. Take it to your sewing machine and stitch the shoulder seam with your seam allowance. My seam allowance is 1 centimeter. Once you have done stitching that together, the next thing that you have to do, you open your lining. This is the front of my lining, and you pick the back pieces. You put them together like this, the both shoulder seam. Take it to your sewing machine, stitch the shoulder seam with your seam allowance. My seam allowance is 1 centimeter. Once you have done that, you take your cap sleeve. We are going to stitch that together. So you put the both front fabric together, you stitch the bottom edge of the cap sleeve together. Once you have done stitching, turn it inside out, take it to your ironing board and give it a good press. Also repeat the same process with the second cap. Once you have done doing that, you take your skirt to your sewing machine, stitch a gather stitch thread at the top edge of your skirt. I have stitched the shoulder seam of my top dress, and I've also repeated the same process with my lining. I take it to my ironing board, I press the seam apart, and I also repeat the same process with my made fabric. This is how it is, and I'll stitch my sleeve together, and I just turn it inside. I'll give it a good press, and I stitch a gather stitch thread at the top edge of my sleeve. I repeat the same process with the second sleeve. And I've also stitched a gather stitch thread on my skirt. This is how it is. I take my skirt to my overlocker sewing machine. I overlock the bottom hem raw edges all around, and then I take it to my ironing board. I fold inside along where I overlock, and then I fold it all over again. From here to here, it's about 2 centimeters, and I take it to my ironing board. I give it a nice good press so that when I'm going to hem my dress, it is more easier for me to hem. What we are going to do, we are going to stitch our sleeve at the armhole of our dress. To do that, you take your measuring tape. You're going to measure inside. You take your measuring tape, you measure inside about 3 centimeters, and you take your marker, you mark that. And you also repeat the same process from the back armhole. Place your measuring tape like this. You measure inside 3 centimeters. Once you have done that, the next thing that you have to do, you pick your sleeve, fold it into 2 like this, and take your scissors to notch the center of your sleeve. Once you have done that, you place your sleeve like this. This is the shoulder seam. Place it together and secure that with a pin. Once you have done securing that with a pin, you pick your sleeve like this. This is where we mark. Place your sleeve like this. The raw edges is facing out the armhole, and you take your pin, you secure that, and you come down to this other side. You repeat the same process. Once you have done pinning that together, the next thing that you have to do, you pick your gather stitch thread. You just pull it a little bit. You're not going to pull it so much. You just pull it a little bit, and then you go ahead and pin your sleeve around the armhole of your dress making. Once you have done doing that, you also repeat the same process on this other side. Pull it a little bit and take your pin and pin it together. Make sure to also repeat the same process on the second side of the armhole. I have pinned my calf sleeve around the armhole of my dress. What I'm going to do, I will pick my lining. I'm going to pull the both front fabric together. Put them together like this. Take it to your sewing machine. Stitch around the both armhole and the neckline. Once you have done stitching, take your scissors, snip around the both armhole and the neckline. Once you have done doing that, take it to your ironing board and give it a good press. I have stitched the both armhole of my dress and the neckline. I turn it inside out, take it to my ironing board and give it a good press. This is how it is right now. The next thing that we have to do, we are going to put the both side seam of our top dress together. Put them together like this. Take it to your sewing machine and stitch it all the way down. My seam allowance is 1 centimeter. Come down to the other side. Put the both sides seam together. Take it to your sewing machine and top stitch. My seam allowance is 1 centimeter. I have stitched the side seam of my top dress together. This is how it is. I take it to my ironing board. I give it a good press. This is how it looks once you have done that. The next thing that we have to do, we are going to gather our skirt at the waistline of our top dress. So what you are going to do, you pick your top dress like this. Place it on the waistline of your skirt. You go ahead and pin it all around. Once you have done pinning, take it to your sewing machine and top stitch. My seam allowance is 1.3 centimeter or half an inch. When you are pinning your top dress on your skirt, make sure that you separate your lining. Do not include your lining. So go ahead and stitch it together. Once you have done stitching, take it to your overlocker, overlock the raw edges, or use zigzag to overlock the raw edges. I have stitched the skirt around the waistline of my top dress. This is how it is once you have done that. And I take it to my overlocker. I overlock the raw edges. This is how it is. If you don't have overlocker, you can always use zigzag to overlock the raw edges. The next thing that you have to do, you are going to fold your lining inside and use your lining to cover the waistline of your top dress. The same measurement that you use to stitch your skirt on the top dress, the same measurement that you will fold inside to cover the raw edges. So my seam allowance was 1.3 centimeter or half an inch. So I take it to my ironing board. I just fold inside half an inch or 1.3 centimeter. What I'm going to do, I will take it to my sewing machine and run a straight stitch all the way down. Once I am done with that, I will also hem my dress. I've already folded it inside and I will fold it again. I will take it to my sewing machine and run a straight stitch all the way. I have used my lining to cover the raw edges of the waistline. This is how it is once you have done that. And I've also hemmed my dress around. This is how it is. The next thing that we have to do, we are going to stitch our placket at the center back of our dress. So what you are going to do, you take it to your ironing board. Make sure you iron interfacing on one side of the placket. Once you have done with that, on this other side, you fold inside 1 centimeter. Also repeat the same process on this other side. So what we are going to do, we are going to pin it on our center back dress that we are making. This is where the interface is. So it's at the back of our dress. All you have to do, you just go ahead and start pinning the placket on your dress making. I have pinned the placket at the center back of my dress. This is how it is. What I'm going to do, I will take it to my sewing machine and run a straight stitch all the way down, and I will come down to this other side. I will repeat the same process. My seam allowance is 1 centimeter. I have given it a top stitch. This is how it is, and I trim a little bit out from my seam allowance. So what we are going to do, this is my 1 centimeter seam allowance that I fold inside. What you're going to do, you fold it inside like this. What you are going to do, you take it to your sewing machine, you top stitch at the neckline, and then you come to the hem. This is the bottom edge of your dress. Fold it inside, and you go ahead and give it a top stitch like this. You come down to this other side, you repeat the same process. You can see how the fabric is. Fold it on top of each other like this and continue stitching your neckline. Come down to the bottom edge, you repeat the same process. Fold it together and stitch it along. Once you have done stitching, trim a little bit out from the seam allowance, then you turn it inside out. I have given it a top stitch. This is how it is. I trim a little bit out from my seam allowance, and I also repeat the same process on the bottom edge. Once you have done that, the next thing that you have to do, you place your hand inside like this, you flip it inside out, and then you place your hand inside, you flip it inside out. Once you have done that, just pick your needle, use it to push these raw edges inside like this. And once you have done doing that, take your pin and secure that in place. All you have to do, you just go ahead and pin it all around. Make sure to also repeat the same process on the other side of the placket. Once you have done pinning, take it to your sewing machine and top stitch. Once you have done stitching, you can use the opportunity to install your snap closure or your button hole. This is the final look of my dress. It is beautiful, step-by-step tutorial. I have used the opportunity to install my snap closure, or you can also make the center back as a button hole for your dress. This is how it is once you have done making your own dress. This dress is for 1 to 2 years old child, and I use the opportunity to make a diaper cover for the child. If you want to make a diaper cover for your dressmaking, I would recommend that you should go to my website www.helloangel.design. You will download the pattern paper for $3.99, which is quite affordable. You'll be able to download the pattern paper and make a diaper cover for your dress making. Please subscribe to our YouTube. Please like and share this video, and have a wonderful day. Bye.